All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick, we are 2024 preview and prediction for the Utah Utes as they make their transition over to the Big 12. Kyle Whittingham has been the lead man since 2005, amassing a 161-79 record. Andy Ludwig, who's been in the role of OC since 2019. Then Morgan Staley, who's been on staff since 07, defensive coordinator since 2016. 10 straight winning seasons for the Utes, 40th ranked recruiting class as the headlines. Look at this offense. Last year, it was just a disaster in terms of health. Cam Rising was originally supposed to be questionable for the season opener against Florida. Ends up not playing all year long. Same goes for tight end Brant Kuthi. So obviously a lot of miscommunication, I guess, from the media and the medical staff or whatever that may be. Nonetheless, these guys are going to be fully healthy for 2024. Rising coming off that torn ACL, plenty of toughness. Does it very well as a runner. Plays above his size of 6'2", 218. Really allows him to fall forward though. Good vertical passer. Velocity is about below average. Accuracy and touch is evident, though. Again, the health last year was a bit of an issue. So maybe a concern coming into this season. But this guy is a bit of a forgotten quarterback, Nick, because he didn't play last year. He's been highly productive as a balanced passer. Last time we saw him out in 22, over 3,000 yards through the air, and another near 500 on the ground. This is an underrated quarterback who's, been in college football for a long time, a lot of experience, but a lot of skill as well.
This is a guy that's a very talented player, been around forever in the sport, it feels like. Last year, there were a lot of question marks about whether or not he's going to play. It seemed like he was going to be able to make it back. Didn't end up making it back last year. Utah had a ton of woes at quarterback last year. They really struggled to figure it out. Their quarterback play was horrendous between Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson last year. And now they're probably happy to have Rising back, who was really solid in 22, a guy that is a veteran that's been around the sport for a while, knows the playbook really well, knows the coaching staff very well. And obviously returning some solid pieces, and Brent Kuthi, who did not play last year either, and some other pieces we're going to highlight a little bit later on the rest of this team. You have to be happy with a Utah fan returning a guy like Rising, who is a really solid player in a known quantity. Just what is he going to look like coming back from that injury after so much time off? That's certainly something you got to question.
Hey, look at the running back unit, Micah Bernard, a guy who only saw 2 games. A great set of skills he provides as an efficient runner, really impressive pass catcher as well. Jalen Glover was a quality number 2 back last year. Formidable 1-2 punch here. Micah Mitchell, behind them, a guy they think can be a bruiser, but still young and has things to improve on before he sees an increase in time. Did add a great player in Anthony Woods, who had over 2K yards combined over the last 2 seasons at Idaho. So in terms of notability, this backfield certainly has some quiet names. Jaquindon Jackson was pretty solid last year, was certainly disappointed, but was also incredibly beat up. Sayoni Vaki was a really impressive guy coming over from safety. He had to perform for them. He's no longer here, though. So it's going to be up to Bernard, Nick, a guy who's also been really impressive in the past.
Bernard's a guy who was really solid, didn't play a whole lot last year, only in 2 games. Certainly concerned about his durability as well. That's a big issue with this Utah team, right? How durable is this team going to be this year? What can they look like in terms of durability? Can everyone stay healthy? That's something that certainly concerns me. Jalen Glover is a really solid number 2 back last year, 562 yards rushing, 4.1 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns for him. He returns hoping to have production a little bit better than that. He's a solid number 2 back. The offensive line is solid for this team, so I do trust that they'll be able to get the running back room going. Bernard was really solid a couple of years ago in the past, was really great in 2022. I think he can be good again this year.
Looking at the wide receiver room, Money Parks, 5'10", 175, has proven to be a game breaker, but the lack of quality QB play last year took a big nosedive in production. Micah Pittman was only able to play in 2 games before injury ended his season. Should provide as a slot option with special team abilities. Dorian Singer did absolutely nothing for USC last year after being a major breakout star the year earlier at Arizona. Good route runner who's shown the ability to be dangerous in the open field. Tashawn Lyons, a true freshman, arrives over from Washington following Kalen DeBoer's departure. They also added Syracuse's top wide receiver, Damian Alford, who was dismissed, but was a big playmaker for them before that. And, of course, the aforementioned Brant Kuthi, a versatile tight end at 6'2", 222. Using a variety of alignments, good route runner, good body control. Certainly lacks the ideal size to be a good blocker, but strength and top-end speed. It's not great in terms of being a highly coveted NFL prospect, but this is a real good pass catcher coming off an ACL of his own. Him and Rising very much forgotten. What do you think of this receiving room, Nick, that last year they didn't really have a chance to showcase their talents, not just because of injuries, but the lack of QB play?
This is a room that's really concerning because there are some boom or bust pieces, but there also are some concerns with these pieces. Money Parks is a good player. I like him a lot. 293 yards receiving, 9.5 yards per grab, and 2 scores last year. For him, obviously, he was hampered by the production of the quarterbacks as much was this room as well. Munir McClain as well. He returns 269 yards, receiving 17.9 yards per grab, and 2 scores for him. Dorian Singer, Damian Alford are two really nice gambles, but that's what they are. They're gambles, right? Alford just dismissed from Syracuse, and then Singer did not look good at all at USC. Can both those guys get to the top levels? Obviously, Alford's a really talented player, but he has to focus on the field, and then Singer himself as well. He needs to get back to that Arizona form. If those two guys are really solid and take off and have that really productive season they're hoping for, this offense could be really strong. If those guys struggle and Parks doesn't have a great season, plus Kudli struggles coming back from his injury, it could be a long year for this receiving core.
Now you look at the offensive line. Caleb Lemieux only played a few snaps last year as a redshirt freshman. He's going to take over for Spencer Fanu, who wasn't very good. Fanu was going to be moving to right tackle. Lemieux will be at the left side. Tanoa Tagaya played 350 snaps at left tackle himself and was pretty incredibly poor, but appears to be kicking inside the left guard. Johnny Maya is going to be the starter at center. Only 300 snaps through 4 years, though, in his career. Michael McCoskey at right guard is going to be their best returning starter. Offensive line features plenty of turnovers. Should be a quality unit, but I'm certainly slightly concerned as I just don't have too many high-level proven contributors. You don't typically see many of these guys go to the league. They're typically, guys who are disciplined, coachable football players that provide good things for the program. But they don't go on to accomplish too many things, Nick, so that certainly means that development might not be as ideal. I'm not going to really worry about this unit because it's never been a problem under Whittingham, really. Does that concern resonate with you as well, or do you think they'll be all right?
I think they'll be all right. Obviously, like you alluded to there, these guys don't normally pump out a lot of, high-level tackles to the NFL, high-level offensive line pieces. These are normally guys that just, play their 4 years and then go on and find other careers outside of football or potentially coaching. Whittingham hasn't really developed any talent in that regard, but it's still a unit that's productive. I'm not concerned about this unit. There's some nice experience here, a couple seniors, a couple redshirt juniors. Spencer Fanu at right tackle worries me a little bit as a true sophomore guy. Doesn't have a whole lot of experience. Is he going to be able to stay up to par playing in this new conference? I certainly worry about the right side a little bit, but in general, I do think this offensive line, it's a solid enough unit to get them by.
Looking at the verdict for the Utes offense, injuries and the lack of QB play, in terms of quality options, flat out ruined this team's potential last year, but Rising and Kudli are back. Well, the ground game should have the skill and physicality up front to overwhelm this conference. We'll get back to showcasing great balance, had over 35 points per game 2 years in a row before last season. That's the expectation here, is 35 a game. And injuries for this entire team was ridiculous, Nick, off the wall. But last year for offense, it really was something that just they couldn't really overcome in terms of reaching the goals they wanted to. Bryson Barnes had some good games, but overall wasn't great. Nate Johnson could not throw the ball one bit. So, they just had nothing at quarterback, and it caused this entire unit to stall. On top of the supporting cast, it was also incredibly beat up.
It certainly was a tough year in terms of staying healthy, which really proved to be a tough look for Utah fans. I'm sure they were unhappy with how unhealthy their team was. The offense was unproductive at all. They really weren't able to do anything in the second half of the season because of injuries. Certainly unfair for a team that I really thought had a chance to compete last year in that conference. That's going to be the story this year, is can they stay healthy? If they can stay healthy, this is a solid offensive unit in my opinion. But that's the biggest concern. A lot of these guys are returning from tough injuries like Rising, torn ACL, other injuries that Kudli had. If they can return fully healthy, this offense is not a bad unit at all. But if they have injuries, if they go down to backups again last year, we'd be looking at an offense that struggles again.
Looking at the defensive side of the ball, unit that also, had plenty of injuries, but still performed pretty admirably. Under 20 points per game. They were elite against the run. The defensive line, led by Junior Tafuna, who was a major disappointment last year. 6'3", 310. Has the ability to be a major run defense enforcer. Just didn't see it last year. Keanu Tanavaza was a pretty good player. Richard freshman will need to find better consistency at 6'4", 295. Solid rotational help. And Akil Famai, Samati Papa, both 310 and 330 respectively. Good interior line with veterans and size. Edge department loses Jonah Ellis, but they return too high on defensive ends in Van Fillinger and Connor O'Toole. Fillinger has been a good run stopper, with O'Toole being a nice high-energy pass rusher who only saw 8 games last year. Logan Fano was pretty impressive in his 5 games. And then from BYU, John Henry Daly's going to join the fold. Limited experience. Overall, very impressive group here on this defensive line. They ranked 4th nationally against the run last year, Nick. And that's the name of the game with Utah, and that's why a lot of people expect them to just come into this conference and dominate, is because they have legit physicality. This is a legit run defense. They didn't play bad one bit last year. The most yards they allowed last year was USC and Oregon, 145 and 142 in those games, and even then they weren't particularly horrible. This is a really good run defense. It always has been. How much do you think they're going to dominate in the Big 12?
There's a very strong run defense. I think can have a lot of success in this conference. Van Fillinger, 31 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Connor O'Toole, 6 total tackles, 4.5, or 31 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, plus 3 pass breakups for him. Keanu Tavashia, 27 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Junior Tafalo, 17 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups for him. Logan Fano, 14 total tackles, 4.5 and 3.5 for him. And then Akiv Vimani, 14 total tackles, 1.5 each for him. So a lot of production. They returned their 6 solid guys that got good snaps last year. They all, have double-digit total tackles, guys that got some good experience. This defensive line's a very strong unit with some nice depth.
Look at the middle of their defense. They get both starting linebackers back. Karen Reed really improved his run-stopping ability. Only missed 4 tackles all year. Lander Barton was only held, 7 games. Has proven his value over the years, especially in coverage and against the run. Josh Calvert only played a few snaps. Baroni Anai hasn't seen the field. The stud role will be occupied by Sione Vatu, a true sophomore, and Trey Reynolds will back him up. Very impressive front 6 and 7. This is a phenomenal linebacking core led by Reed and Barton. Nick, these guys have been, big-time leaders for this defense for a couple of seasons now. Lavani Dumani, transferred over from Stanford, ended up being the leading tackler. But he didn't say have the same impact that Reed had, so I don't think that's a major loss for them. I think Reed certainly is going to get back to making some negative plays like he did in 22, where he had almost 10 tackles for loss. Certainly want to see that number get back up there, and I think it will.
Reed's a really good linebacker, a solid player, returning 67 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups, plus a pick 6 last year. Good numbers there. Lander Barton as well, really solid coverage asset, 34 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, and a pick 6 included in that. Sione Fatu, 18 total tackles and a pass breakup for him. This linebacking core is solid. I like what they have in this middle of the defense. I like what they can do with this defensive scheme. I think this 4-2-5 is a really efficient and productive scheme. I like what they have at linebacker here.
And you look at the secondary, a unit that certainly struggled down the stretch. They didn't have a single interception over the last 4 games, where at the same time they allowed, 10 passing touchdowns. So the secondary certainly had some issues. Look at Zamaya Vaughn. He should really take that next step this upcoming season. Following an impressive year, Keenan Johnson, a good add from Georgia Tech to fill a starting cornerback role. Backups are both redshirt freshmen Cameron Calhoun and Elijah Davis. Also has plenty of youth in Smith Snowden, who played extensive action in 5 games. And then a redshirt freshman in C.J. Blocker. Safety group is revamped as well. Nate Ritchie played a good bit last year, but wasn't all that good. Should improve in his 3rd year in the program, though. Teo Johnson, on the other hand, was highly impressive as a true freshman. Akali Gilman arrives from Stanford. Wasn't all that good, but has some noted experience. And then a true sophomore, Jonathan Hall, will contest for a backup role. The secondary honestly wasn't not very good last year. They played hard and, of course, had injuries, but have plenty of youth, so the upside is there. As is the growing pains, though, Nick. So I certainly think that's something to watch in terms of veteran leadership, though. It's hard to really find in the secondary outside of Vaughn. I guess maybe Johnson, since he's a senior as well. What do you think the secondary will do? Because the Utes certainly don't seem like a team that's just going to significantly struggle. But one of their starting cornerbacks last year, Travis Broughton, had the worst year of his career, which was the 5th season in the program, and he transfers out. So things are certainly a little bit gloomy in the back end.
Last year, the secondary was the weakest point of this defense. They were really solid defense last year. Incredible run defense, right? Top 5 unit, top 20 defense in total yards and total points per game. But they were 65th in the nation in pass yards per game at about 225 per game given up. So that's a concerning number. And they don't really return enough players, in my opinion, to feel fully confident in terms of guys that have experience playing for this team. Now, Vaughn is a good player to turn, right? 53 total tackles, 6 pass breakups, 5 tackles for loss. Solid numbers. Tao Johnson, 33 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups for him. Nate Ritchie, 22 total tackles, 1.5 and 1 for him. And Smith Snowden, I thought he was solid in coverage, 7 total tackles and limited snaps. They returned some other different pieces here and there that you allude to. C.J. Blocker, he could potentially play back there. It could be an okay piece for the secondary. This is a unit that worries me. This is the worst part of this defense, in my opinion. Certainly, it leaves me believing that this defense is going to struggle at times if they can't prevent the pass. They'll be able to stop the run. Certainly, I think they'll be able to stop the run with a lot of efficiency. But I'm worried about them stopping the pass, certainly.
Looking at the verdict for this defense, no one else is more primed to win the Big 12 due to what its linebacking core and defensive line prowess can provide than the Utes. It's a very stout bunch that has great physicality and size. I certainly wonder how the secondary will perform, but it won't be enough to cause ripple effects throughout this entire team by any means. Looking at the prediction, moving to this conference honestly may have made things easier here for the Utes with the physicality they play with, following a year derailed by just an incredibly bad injury bug of any team I've really seen in sports. They're going to be primed and ready to come out and play with a chip on their shoulder. schedule isn't all that tough, and they should easily run the table, I would say. And obviously, we're far apart on this one, Nick. And I think the thesis is pretty simple with Utah, and I think most people would share the same sentiment. As injuries really did derail this team last year because they still played very good football. They played Washington on the road very tough in the weather. The Oregon game, I figured they would have issues in that one, and they lost by a pretty substantial amount. Still beat USC, though. They're able to outlast a tough UCLA defense. They beat Florida, of course. And obviously, not all their wins and losses are great. The bowl game was pretty embarrassing. The Colorado game was incredibly close as well. But this is a team that played really hard last year with a pretty poor roster due to how many injuries they had. And again, that thing of them having a chip on their shoulder, Nick, I think it's going to be very real. I think Whittington and this, coaching staff, Whittingham, that is, they're going to be incredibly focused, and I think they're going to come to play in this new conference. 10-2 for me punches our ticket to the finale.
You and I disagree on this simply because I think this team's injuries are going to derail this team again this year. I hate to say that. I hate to be that person to speak about that, but I'm really concerned about what this offense can do with the injuries. I'm concerned what Cam Rising and Micah Bernard and Brent Kuthi are going to look like after not playing a whole lot last year. Some of them not even playing at all, with Kuthi and Rising not playing. Rising still rehabbing that ACL tear. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the secondary getting torched potentially in some of these games. I have them losing to Arizona, a game where I think they can get torched in the secondary by that incredible wide receiver and quarterback duo they have out there. I have Iowa State grinding them down and winning a game on the road at the tail end of the season to get them to 8-4. I like this team. This team's a good team, but I do think that they're just have some weaknesses, and we saw it last year that injuries could really derail this team. I don't think they have enough depth to overcome that issue again this year. If Rising goes down, I'm extremely concerned about the quarterback play. Same thing if the running back room gets a little bit weak. The secondary, I think, is just too weak for me, and they're going to get torched in certain games and struggle against Oklahoma State, UCF, and Arizona. Some passing offenses that are really exciting for me this year. This is a fun team. I think it's a team certainly worth tuning into. I just can't pull the trigger on getting them in this conference title game. I have them at 8-4 on the outside looking in. A solid season again. Obviously this is a team that has a really consistent coach in Whittingham who continues to get 10 straight winning seasons. I have them going for 11 straight and getting to a bowl game, but I just cannot pull the trigger on this team being better than 8 wins right now.
Yeah, Sam Heward being the backup would certainly lead to some issues, and that's certainly a plausible thesis. Just because you've rehabbed an injury doesn't mean you're going to come back be the same player. We've seen that with Michael Penix when he first came back from Indiana after a second ACL tear. No confidence one bit. Played absolutely awful. Certainly possible that happens with Rising. I think he'll be okay in this system, though. But it certainly is possible. You're not the same player one bit, even close to that. And if that's an issue, then this team certainly will struggle. So that's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. Far apart here on the Utes. I think this is going to be a very good football team, though. Will be interesting to see. This will be a nice little friendly wager, I think, throughout the year. Even as a USC fan, I certainly wish no ill will against the Utes.
Looking forward to seeing what this team can do this year.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.